All right, let's start it here. So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Acton Chinese Resident Experience webinar today, an event to honor the AAPI heritage in May. On behalf of Acton Chinese, American Civic Society, Acton Historic Society, and ActonTV, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us during your long Memorial Weekend. And my name is Don Wang, Acton's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commissioner, and a former co-chair for the ACAS. I'm the moderator for today's webinar, along with Doc Herrick. We have an exciting agenda with multimedia presentations and a roundtable discussion by 5 guest panelists here. Please turn off your video and audio. Feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinars in chat, either a general one and a particular one to a particular panelist. We'll try to incorporate them during the panel discussion or at the very end. So let me introduce Doc Herrick, my co-moderator and the president of Acton Historic Society, who will cover a brief overview of Acton Chinese history and our oral history project. So Doc, you have the floor.
Okay, well, thank you, Don. And thanks to everybody that pulled themselves away from the beaches and barbecues on this lovely weekend to join us on this presentation. What we'd like to do is start this presentation off with a quick PowerPoint, really just to kind of level set everyone as to the history behind both the project and the Chinese experience in Acton. So if we could start that on the first page. Great. Okay, so I also want to thank the board and Bill Clower of the Acton Historical Society. A while back, we thought that although the Historical Society's been doing a great job of communicating the story of colonial and 19th century Acton, there were many additional communities that have really created what Acton is today that also have their stories. So that's how this oral history began. And the goal was to have a series of recordings that we could have in our archives for future generations to understand really the experience of different groups. So we'll be leading with the Chinese American Civic Society and their folks and the general Chinese population. And later on, we'll be doing South Asian Indians and other communities. So we'll go to the next one. So obviously, Acton is a town of immigrants, starting with the early Paleo Indians around 10,000 BC as the glaciers started to recede. Later, Native Americans and First Nations occupied a lot of what is New England as well as Acton. In Acton, there were groups referred to as the Nipmucs and the Neshobas. They were part of the Massachusetts and Pawtucket tribes of the Algonquin Confederation, obviously followed by the early colonialists in the 1620s. And other groups over time also immigrated into the area looking for opportunities and farming and the ability to start new lives here. Next. So this graph gives you a good sense of the growth in Acton's population, much of it from immigrant communities, starting right after the Second World War. And as you can see, right around the early 1950s, with suburbanization, the growth of high tech along Route 128, the excellent school systems, we can go back to that, great. As well as the previously relatively affordable real estate situation in Acton. And foreign-born Actonians grew from about 14% of the population in 2000 to about 26%. Next. This is a fairly busy slide, so hang in with us, but the history of Chinese immigration really started in the 19th century with the gold rush in California in the 1849, 50s. It was mainly single men coming from Southeast China, Cantonese, Taiwanese, and they settled on the West Coast primarily. In 1868, the Burlingame Treaty established relations with China. In addition to most favored nation status, they pretty much lifted any restrictions on immigration from the Chinese. And that continued up until the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, following the Depression in the 1870s, when there was a lot of racism, frankly, and resistance to immigration generally, and particularly the Chinese. Later, in 1943, that was repealed. Following the World War II, Chinese were allies with the United States, and it was felt that they should be brought into the country, although it was fairly limited. In 1965, President Johnson signed the Immigration and Nationality Act, which pretty much lifted all limits on national quotas for immigration into the United States. And of course, in the 1970s, Nixon opens up China, cultural exchanges begin, followed in the late 70s and 80s by academic students, different individuals coming to live in this country and take jobs in high tech and other areas. In 1992, the Chinese Student Protection Act, following the Tiananmen Square massacre, enabled large amounts of Chinese who felt politically at risk if they returned to mainland China to stay in this country. And immigration really grew from then on. Next. So in Acton currently, we have the state's ninth largest Chinese population, and it has increased about 150% since 2000. So it's obviously a very attractive area for all sorts of immigrants and professionals and Asians in particular. Some of the statistics that refer to Asian include South Asian Indians, but about roughly half of that figure of Asians are Chinese, and 34% of the students currently in the Acton-Boxborough School District are Asian. Next. Clearly, you know, the Chinese community has been a real boon to Acton, both economically and culturally, and they've formed not only their own institutions, but they've been very active in existing groups, nonprofits, and town organizations, highlighting that, you know, some of the major contributions include the Acton Chinese Language School, the large collection of Chinese language materials in Acton's Memorial Library, the Metro West Bible Church, and I believe that's Mandarin and Cantonese language services in Littleton, and a series of culture days and other celebrations really designed to help local, you know, Caucasian and white folks understand really what the cultural pinnings of Chinese society are and the history. Next. So this oral history project started really, I would say about a year ago, and we got going this year and have done about 15 interviews so far. And one of the things we'd like to show you is a video that was developed to kind of show some of the major themes, stories, and issues that you're going to hear today. So why don't we roll that?
Absolutely, there are stereotypes for sure. There's expectations that come from ourselves, that come from our parents, that come from our greater Chinese or Asian American community, and then the greater Acton community of what it means to be a Chinese Acton student. The expectation is you are good at math. The expectation is you do take more rigorous academic classes. The college you go to, because you have to go to college, that's basically the expectation, is going to be higher on that list of the top universities.
In general, the Chinese students are more focused on task and more goal-oriented in high school, college, and probably into getting a first career.
So every 2 or 3 years, like, we always go back to China. We always bring them with us. So it's good, right? So they like Chinese cuisine, yeah. The Chinese culture, they also interested in, yeah.
I was so consumed by skating, and a lot of the skating world is predominantly white. So that was like what I was around most of the time. So I think there were many times where I would just reject Chinese culture, or things that I just didn't want to be involved in, because I wanted to not either feed into stereotypes or just not be considered an other, a different.
I don't like brainstorm because it just pop up so many ideas. Later you will find that these ideas, they will not work. That's enough confidence that we try to through, then we raise our voice, so we have very good confidence about our answers, then we raise it.
And the first class I went to, I could not understand what the professor is saying. I only need to know what kind of homework he's assigned.
Here, when I met my colleagues, and which mostly, were engineers, their wife, most of them didn't work. That was a culture shock to me. And their wife had good education, and they give up their jobs, raise their kids. They're volunteer, they work in library, in their kids' school. For me, it was kind of unthinkable at the time. So, you get all this education, so you should have your own career. So that's very different.
There are periods of time I have to adjust myself, because with the newborn baby, right, and also new culture, and I did not have a job anymore. I stayed at home, right? So I have to rethink about my career, rethink about my future. So that was a big adjustment for me.
I think culture-wise, it's very similar, because I think essentially there's the people from Taiwan. They're very much they have a Confucius background, teaching kind of built into their blood. It's part of their DNA. And I would say that's a lot of that is similar for mainlanders, but I think mainlanders, they face a lot more competition, even among themselves, to be successful, to get ahead. Because if you don't, there are millions of other people would.
I think since I was in 6th grade, I really wanted to kind of be the voice for people who, my class at the time, we would promise our classmates to get free ice cream or something. In the later years of high school, we had more pressing issues that we started to advocate for, and some things were more minor, small things that would try to alleviate some student stress, and other things that we tried to help bring social justice to underserved communities, and kind of donating to organizations that would help low-income families during the pandemic. And I think those things, it allows me to feel like my time at high school isn't just me just like working my hardest to get what I want, but it also kind of gives back to the community that has kind of like helped me become who I am.
We spend a lot of time volunteering also in Chinese school over the years, especially at the very beginning, So we have so many family. We became very close because of the experience in those volunteer work, right? And the kids also became very close. Yeah. So it has been very rewarding experience for us.
Back in 2017 and 2018, I think our school has about triple sized. We have about 600 students, not only in Acton, but also around this neighborhood.
I really saw the Chinese families in Acton come together to they're not here to be like, we're just going to get our kids through this good school system and get them to college. They're like, we're actually going to build community in this town and have our presence be felt, to the point where now we're having this conversation.
There's Chinese, there's American, there's Russian, there's Korean. So it's our belief is that the body of Christ should not be divided by your race, by your culture, by your language. So everyone should be one. That's how we practice.
I think I'm somebody who has a pretty healthy self-esteem. I don't feel inferior to anybody. I certainly don't see myself as inferior as Chinese to be inferior to Caucasian people. I just don't feel that way. Maybe part of me reject that thinking.
I think my experience overall, I think was positive. I feel like I grew a lot, I learned a lot, and I was able to have a voice in the community, do the things I wanted to, I liked. And if anything, this is probably a silver linings out of the pandemic, out of my retirement. I was able to connect with more people, actually, virtually, and do more things and for the organizations.
I don't think that's fair to China. Also, it's not fair to Chinese American here, because we got hit, right? So if there is something, they took on us. So really not a good environment. And honestly speaking, for the first time, I feel unsafe.
From 2001 to 2012, I was part of the Acton Boxborough Public School District. Through Merriam, through RJ Gray, through Acton Boxborough. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty positive that every single educator I ever had there was a white person.
I do wish I didn't push away all like the culture as much as I did growing up. But like, there's nothing I can really do about it now other than just be more involved now. But yeah, I think that is definitely something that a lot of like students feel after they like graduate high school and kind of like be more exposed to the real world. And I think that's something that I've definitely learned from being in New York City, where it's a lot more diverse, and that like you can be proud of being diverse, and it's something, yeah, that you should be proud of.
Sometimes people make comments like, your English is a lot better than my Chinese. That kind of comment, I just shrug off. I think, it's probably a stock social talk. It doesn't mean much. If I want to take it seriously, I would think that's an insult to me. I study English. I don't take the offense because I feel like it was not intentional. It was not personal. It was just sometimes people try to make social talk and they don't know how to make it more comfortable for the receiving end.
There was one way in which it wasn't helpful to them, and that was it's very easy, you know, this model minority idea that everybody who's Chinese is great in math. Sometimes they felt that was a burden that they couldn't meet. And they felt like, I can't be Chinese in basic math class. You know, you have to be in honors to be Chinese.
Last year, it really bothered me that in learning United States history for 2 years, the only incidences where we learned about Asian Americans were the Chinese Exclusion Act and the experiences of Asians at Angel Island. And while those were two very clear examples of the Asian American experience, I think there's definitely very little coverage of not only Asian American experience, but other minority experiences as well.
We're actually looking into a bill which has been filed early in March by Senator called Louise and from Framingham. And the bill is about the racial justice in education. So basically, it's not just for Asian Americans, it's for all the minorities, including Black, Latinos, Indigenous people. So I think I was hoping to push that forward.
Definitely, we love Acton very much. That's why after we retired, we still stay in this town.
Yeah, I like the natural beauty here, right? Small town setting. So many trees, green trees and grass. So I really like this place. And still like Laro Park or Arboretum and the new bike trail, they all are my favorites, right? So really I lived here probably the longest in my life so far. And we have so many good friends close by and our neighbors are extremely nice. So I could not imagine I would live in anywhere else. Actually, I just love here. 20 years is my time here. I think I will stay.
Most of my friends are extremely supportive of each other, and we don't really kind of echo this negative stress that a lot of parents or other people might put on us. But I think, overall, just I was able to form a supportive environment, and we all had our eyes focused on, doing well and putting in our best effort, but it was more about us doing our best than getting that A+ or whatever.
Each year, the biggest event we hold is the Chinese New Year celebrations. That's normally we invited all the families and friends and around the town and across different towns and go to we normally host it on the high school auditorium.
The fact that, I don't know who's in charge of all these things, but the fact that Gates would host the Chinese church, that RJ Gray would host the Chinese school, I think that does speak to the care that these powers that be in Acton have shown toward the Chinese community, which I appreciate. And
we want to stay in this country. We love this country so much.
The historical societies in these New England towns have often taken a fairly narrow view, looking at the Revolutionary period or the 19th century, and they don't see the history being made right in front of them by different members of the community. And it helps, I think, give a sense of appreciation of other people's experiences and hopefully a degree of empathy. Wow. So I don't want to go any further without, thanking Chen for producing this wonderful video and struggling through. Could you raise your hand just so we know who you are? Come on.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And I want to point out that Qiang Yu, he is also in the audience with us. He is actually a well-known expat in China in film industry. And without him, we won't be able to show the film today.
Well, thank you for struggling through 20 plus hours of interviews to pull out some of the best pieces. That was great.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I hope also the audience enjoyed this short documentary film. And it's so well done. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our 5 guest panelists, and by the alphabetic order of their last name: Alex Dai, Kong Xuan, Jing Shi, and Virginia Taylor, and Yu Xuan. And after my brief intro, each will take a couple minutes to talk about their stories of why they came to the US or to the Acton, their families, and their involvement in Acton. So let me get into a little bit of Chinese culture here on names. In China, other than at home or with close friends, we normally address people by their last name, then followed by first name, and all the last name with a respective title. And today, we happen to have 2 first name, Xuan. So in Chinese, there are 2 completely different characters, pronounced also differently. The first Xuan, actually we say Xuan, is an upper tone. Then the second is Xuan, and it's actually down and up. So to avoid confusion today, I'm going to call the last name first, then followed by the first name. So I'm going to address by Kong Xuan and Yu Xuan. So let's start with Alex Dai. Alex is an AB alumni and a staff missionary at UC Irvine. So now, Alex.
Thanks, Don, and thanks for everyone for being here. I am the son of Chinese immigrant parents. I moved with them in 2000 to Acton. I was born in Canada, so in some ways I am also an immigrant to America, but through Canada. And the older brother of my younger sister who graduated from ABRHS in 2019. I personally graduated through the Acton Boxborough School District, like is mentioned in the video. I went to Merriam School. I went to RJ Gray Junior High. I went to Acton Boxborough Regional High School and graduated in 2012. And then went to college. And so I actually don't live in Acton. And so I guess my place in this panel hopefully is to do justice to the experience of the people, the children of immigrants, Chinese immigrants who grew up in Acton. But I don't currently live in Acton. So I mostly speak to my experience between 2000 and 2012. I currently live in Davis, California. So I actually am a campus missionary and campus staff minister in Davis, California, at UC Davis. And I spent some time in Tennessee going to college and doing some ministry work there. So I'm very much a learner. I'm looking forward to learning. I don't have all the answers and I can only speak from my own experience, but I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Alex. And now I'd like to introduce Kong Xuan. And Kong Xuan is a former AB school committee member and a former ACLS board member. So Kong Xuan.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Acton Historical Society, ActonTV, and ACAS for organizing this wonderful event. My wife and I, our 2 children settled in Acton in year 2000. Both children, like Alex, went through the AB system and graduated. and also both of them actually graduated from Acton Chinese Language School as well. That's a very big part of the community here. I left China after I received my bachelor degree, and I first went to Canada for my graduate study, and eventually finished my study here in US. I lived and worked in Midwest for about 8 years before coming to Acton. So for the last 20 years, my family and I made many friends in Acton through obviously school, PTO activities, and a gate school for my 2 kids, and various sports team gatherings, and the junior high and high school, Acton Chinese Language School volunteering, and serving on school committee and other town committees. And so, that's how I met many friends, and that's also in a way how I learn about the Acton and its rich history. Currently, I serve on the Acton Volunteer Coordinating Committee. So anyone of you in the audience would like to be part of this town by volunteering your time. There's many great opportunities. So thank you, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Kongshan. And the next, I'd like to introduce Jianying Shi. Jianying is a former ACL principal and also the current chair of ACAS. Jianying, you are on mute.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity. And so my name is Jing Shi. I came to US in 1994 for my PhD studies. I was assistant professor and lecturer in China in a university. After I graduated from my PhD study in Oregon, and I have been working in the biotech and pharma industry. And in Cambridge, that's the reason I moved to Acton in year 2000. And I raised my 2 kids here in Acton, and both of them graduate from AB school system. I really love Acton and love our community. I volunteered in ACLS for about 10 years, first as a teacher, then as a dean, and later as principal and board. Starting in year 2006, I served as a board member of ACAS, and in year 2019, I served as a board chair of ACAS. Glad to be in this group and to have this conversation together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jianying. Next panelist would be Virginia Taylor, and Virginia is a former ACL board member and a parent with adopted children from China. So Virginia.
Thank you for inviting me to join this panel. I am Virginia Taylor, and I think I bring 3 perspectives on experiences with the Chinese community in Acton. First, as a mother. My husband and I have 2 daughters whom we adopted in China when they were babies. We moved to Acton in the year 2000 when they were ages 5 and almost 2. They went through the Acton school system from kindergarten through high school. And in fact, my older daughter was a classmate of Alex at Merriam School, an elementary school. My family is definitely not unique. When the children were growing up, there were about 25 other families living in Acton and Boxborough who had adopted Chinese children. Most of us wanted to raise our children growing up, to help them grow up knowing and appreciating Chinese culture, as that is part of their legacy. But that was something we could not teach them. So we were so fortunate that they could join the first classes when the Acton Chinese Language School opened in 2003. There they were exposed to Chinese language and culture, and maybe more importantly, Participating in the school opened the door to friendships with Chinese families. So my children did not grow up surrounded by an exclusively white world. Second, beyond my role as a mother, as a white resident of Acton, I've seen so many ways the Chinese community has enriched our town during the past 20 years. Some highlights: forming a core of support for adding Mandarin to the languages taught at AB. And as Doug mentioned, so many culture nights and New Year celebrations that showcase Chinese dance, music, and cuisine to introduce the Caucasians and other groups in Acton to Chinese culture. And more recently, the beautiful China Trail Garden and the Arboretum. These are just a few of the highlights. My third perspective is as a writing teacher of many students from Chinese families in the past 2 decades. In coaching them with high school papers and college application essays, I've gotten a sense of their strengths and their struggles. Although there are some differences between the issues these students face and my own children face, all Chinese children growing up in Acton have in common the need to find their own way of navigating both Chinese and American culture. I'm very interested in hearing this discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. And now, Yu Xuan. And Yu Xuan is an international scholar and a 5-year resident in town. So Yu Xuan.
Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to participate. I think among all the panelists, I may stay shortest time in Acton for 5 years, but we know Acton much earlier. We moved to Acton in 2016. I live with my husband and 2 kids. 2 kids there, 7 and 9 years old, attending Douglas and doing fully remote online program for this year. We know Acton since we moved to the States from Germany in 2008, because we have a close family friends who we know in China. They live in Acton for more than 20 years. So we were just living in Cambridge on university campus, but they always invited us to visit Acton, to visit their house, to spend Chinese holidays with them. So we know Acton for a long time. It was not a surprise that when I got a new job in Maynard, we moved to Acton. We started by renting a place at New View, a co-housing community in Acton. And then later we purchased our first home in Acton in Indian Village. So it's a great pleasure to know Acton and know the people here. I also would like to take this opportunity to thank Don Wang and Doug Herrick for your initiative to make this oral history project possible and to give me an honor to participate in this project. When I worked together with Qiang Yu on this film, both of us think it's a great learning opportunity, and we want to share more video with the audience because we have around 20 hours of footage, and there are such enriched content in those films we want to share with everyone. That's some kind of work we may do later, but it's great experience working on it. Thank you. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Yu Xuan. And now it's time for the roundtable panel discussion. So Doug and I going to be the moderator. And so Doug, can you take a start here?
Sure. So we have not done this before, and we're encouraging the panelists to just jump in at any point. We want a lively discussion, and we're interested in all your perspectives and points of view, so do not be shy, and we'll see how this goes. What we thought we'd do is talk first about some of the early experiences in Acton that you experienced, and what it was like to settle into a new town, a new culture. And if you could talk a little bit about some of the culture shock aspects, humorous or challenging situations that you initially faced, I think it would be great for people to hear this. So not to call on anybody, but I will just to kick it off. Alex, would you like to relate any thoughts that you have, and everyone else should feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I don't know if I have too much to say. I feel like I have more to say about other things. Just I was 5 or 6 years old when we moved to Acton, and having been raised in and being born in Canada, I guess for me, there's not that much that was different. I was, yeah, so anyway, let me be clear. I was born in Canada. We made our way through Massachusetts, living in Somerville and Arlington, and then Acton, and that's where my family still lives now. I would just say there were more Chinese people in Acton than in those other places, and so it was a pretty positive thing, but I was always shy. So like going into Merriam as a first grader, being new, I didn't know the people from kindergarten, so it was intimidating still. And yeah, I think my initial memories of it is, yeah, intimidating, but I made friends pretty quickly, and I'm grateful for that. So yeah.
Anyone else like to share initial experiences?
So my initial experience, memorable experience, really was as a young parent. We moved from Midwest outside Chicago, so there's not a 24-hour stores, and my kid had a fever, and we trying to find a local drugstore to buy pain medication, and another stores just closed by 9 o'clock. So that was a culture shock, not in between US and China, but just between our small New England town is and a big suburb in Chicago area. You know, but overall, Acton is a very, very welcoming community. You know, this is shows initial a realtor, how she was able to sort of helping us settle in, to not only find us a house, but really to give us introduction of the town, to later when I met many other people through various social activities, and you know, it's been a wonderful experience for the last 20 years.
I can share something. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if it's related to moving to Acton. So I can share my first experience coming to US. I think I came to Oregon first for my study, and then after graduate, I moved to Acton. So I think the big shock to me moving to came to US is really, I was a little disappointed at the very beginning. In my imagination, before came to US, I was thinking all the tall buildings, stores, lights. And when I landed in US, I found, wow, that's not the case. So I guess I can see how people view China. You know, a lot of people learn about China maybe from movies, books, but really when you first landed in this country, it's so different. So I think also when I moved to Boston area, I was first in Malden, staying at an apartment. I think the environment in Malden and in Acton so different. So we look for houses in all the different places for the school systems. I think the first time when we came to Acton, we fall in love in this place. Quiet, nice neighborhood, and also nice community. When we moved in, also we met so many good friends. and feel this really felt like a home.
I can share some experience as well. I feel that I'm very fortunate that I started in Newville in Acton in a co-housing community because it's the first time for us to live outside of a university housing. When we live on university campus, we were taken care of. Like we never need to worry about what temperature to set in your heater. We never need to worry about how to shovel the snow or what to do with the trash. And then suddenly we are in suburb in Acton. But I feel like Newville, a co-housing community, is the place, the closest thing you can find in suburb to a university close-knit community. So we were fortunate that we rented the biggest house in Newville, and they offered us to pay just the price we can afford at that time. I'm sure it's much, much lower than the market price, and we started there. And the people there were so nice. As young parents, we had no idea how to choose school for our kids. At that time, my son was about to enter kindergarten. I'm sure that's the toughest thing for all young parents in Acton to choose the right kindergarten for your kids. It sounds like the most difficult thing, but people in Newville offered us so much help, advice to guide us through the process. And they passed us down so many toys and clothes from their kids. And we just kept this close relationship with people in Newville, even after we moved out, after we bought our house, because they have so many community events. We regularly go there to attend the community dinner or some other type of community events. So in that sense, I feel like we are very fortunate to find a close-knit community in Acton. And later we moved to Indian Village. It also have this very nice community feeling.
Thank you for sharing that story. You make me want to live in Newville now. Okay, I think, Doug, we covered the first part. We can move to the second section.
Sure. So what we wanted to do is to talk generally about once you had established yourself in Acton, what were your thoughts about engaging with the different Acton communities? Obviously, there was a strong Chinese presence here for many of the folks that arrived later on. But what was the impulse, I guess, between preserving identity and assimilating within the New England culture, and how did you try to balance those two impulses of your new home here? I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you personally tried to manage that process. And I'll just jump right in and say, Kong Shin, how did you do that?
Dawn, when she introduced me and she mentioned that I served on school committee for 6 years, I did that unwillingly, in a sense that, no, it's just joking. So it really started out, as I said earlier, Acton is a very welcome community, and it really started out by Peter Ashton. At that time, he was the chair of the Board of Selectmen, and he came to Acton Chinese Language School, give an introduction of town government and how we as individual community members, regardless of your background, can contribute to the community. Henry Cheng, at that time, the principal of Chinese Language School, encouraged me and supported me to run when there's opening and the Chinese Language School. So that's really how I started, and obviously without the overwhelming support of the voters at large from the town of Acton, recognizing that anyone who is willing to serve, we should give them a chance. Then I wouldn't be elected because at that time, not only the voter population, just even the general population of the Chinese resident is relatively small. But through that process, I learned quite a lot of, it is for the Chinese community here to thrive, really, there needs to be this bridge to be built. Doug, we talk about this. This project is also a bridge building exercise, really for us to share our culture, and at the same time, we also have to learn the traditions and the values of the American society and particularly the Acton community. So my volunteer experience has been, still is a great learning experience for me, and also gave me the opportunity to share the Chinese cultures and many traditions with many wonderful friends I have made through that process.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kongxuan. Actually, the next question I'd like to direct to Jianying. And I know you were a founding board member of ACAS and in 2016. So can you talk a little about what triggered the formation of ACAS? And I guess we already had Acton Chinese Language School. Why ACAS?
Thank you. So as you may know that back in 2016, a group of us, almost all of us were former members, principals or board members of ACLS. So we call ourselves ACLS retiree. We kind of like a bond to be friends and also very active locally, not only serving ACLS, but also serve in culture committee, in school committee, and town, participate in town activities. ACLS is an excellent community. It's a language school. It focuses on Chinese education, learning Chinese and Chinese culture. We felt like we formed ICAS. I think it is a complementary of ACLS. We can focus more on civic engagement and the cultural enrichment. ACAS is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So we had done past several, I think about 5 years, have done a lot. For civic engagement, we encourage voting at the local and state level. For example, we introduce the candidate to people. We highlight the hot topics at the town meeting. We translate the ballot questions. And also, I think we had been collaborating with different local organizations to volunteer. For example, we collaborate with Open Table for annual Chinese New Year celebration. We donate, cook, and serve food together with entertainment and performance each year. And due to the pandemic, we couldn't do this year, but we distributed Chinese goodie bags to people this year. We also collaborate with local United Way and participate in annual fall cleaning. And at the beginning of the pandemic time last year, many hospitals lack of PPE, so we collaborate with ACLS, raise money and collect donations and distributed over 15,000 masks to hospitals and healthcare unit and also supermarkets. And last year we collaborated with Town of Acton and held 2 forum sessions for Black Lives Matter, racial justice and diversity. So I think it's really a collaboration with all the different groups, a lot of contributions for our local members and volunteers. And so And also here, I'd like to thank everyone for participating and thank Acton Historic Society and Acton TV. So we collaborate on this event.
Thank you, Jane. So is there any other things from the panel? Alex, you'd like to talk a little bit about your involvement with the church or with the Acton Chinese Language School?
I can do that. I was gonna talk about something else first, if that's
Okay.
okay. Just on the topic of balancing the goals of assimilation versus preserving heritage. I think I speak an experience that is probably common amongst many immigrant children, or children of immigrants, I should say, where my parents would speak Mandarin in our household, and then me and my sister would respond in English. So we would understand what was being said, but we were like, yeah, not so motivated to develop our own Chinese language skills. I was enrolled in the Acton Chinese Language School when it started, but also like many people in my position, potentially, unlike Uncle Xuan's children, I did not graduate from the Chinese language school. I dropped out because I just did not find it very motivating to do more school, to do something I didn't feel like I was good at. I later regret not valuing the language more, and I guess that's also pretty common. But I guess I wanted to speak to, I think something was named earlier when you asked me about my first experience in Acton. So the first home I lived in Acton was the apartments in Davis Road. And very quickly, I felt the gift of the communal, just the Chinese community, the residents, how like even like the apartment above us, there was a Chinese family that would take care of my sister when she was a baby. And there was a friend who like lived in the apartment over, and we were really close, and other families in the town, and not just the town, but in that literal apartment place. And so I was thinking that while the Acton Chinese Language School, the Acton Church, and like ACAS, like all these organizations are so significant, some of the less like official things, just the people existing and being, these are the spaces where people meet, right? These parents meet and the children meet, but then the life that is shared. One of the gifts I think of every time I think of the Acton, when I think of Acton, I think of, so like Auntie Jingying and Uncle Xuan, like I call them Ai, Shushu, like they're all like extended family, because my family, like my actual aunts and uncles and grandparents live in China. My nuclear family, my parents and my sister, I mean, we're the only ones essentially in America. And so there is a sense that, oh, like a loss, like, oh, I didn't grow up around cousins and uncles and aunts and grandparents, but I am blessed to have had the experience in Acton with a lot of my cousins and uncles and aunts in Acton, inviting each other to each other's homes, sharing resources, even to this day. Not the official stuff, but my parents have so many like friends and who care for them, and they share food, and so that's where I see like a lot of the beauty of the heritage of the Chinese people, because I didn't realize that's not true of every American, that sometimes they just live in a town and they don't know their neighbors, and it's just mom, dad, children, and dog or whatever, and that's it. And I didn't realize actually being in each other's houses. I've been in Auntie Jingying's house, Uncle Xuan's house, like many times. They've been in our home, so wanted to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to save the next question actually to Virginia. Now you actually had to talk about your experience in preserving heritage. I actually really appreciate that feedback, the story you had. So Virginia, I have this question for you. You know, raising adopted children from China, how do you try to preserve the Chinese culture at home for them? You're muted.
A large part of that has been we were so fortunate when the Chinese school opened. And when Harry Chen and Ziyang Wang were drawing up the plans for the Chinese school, they reached out to the adoptive families in Acton and invited us to be part from the very beginning. And so we were excited to enroll our children in the first classes. However, they quickly fell behind, far behind the children who had a parent at home who could help them with their Mandarin homework. As you know, it's very difficult to learn a language as different as Chinese is from English in 1 hour a week. So we brought the problem to the board members, and by then we'd gotten to know the people who were on the initial board of the Chinese school, and they immediately decided to offer a track of classes for Chinese as a second language. And I believe that ACLS was the first Chinese school in the Boston area to do that, to offer a special track of classes for children who either were adopted or who had a parent who spoke Cantonese, so they didn't speak Mandarin at home, or who just happened to be interested in learning the language of the world's growing superpower. So that environment and the people that we met through that environment helped us get to know families and go back and forth to people's houses for dinner. People were very generous, sharing their province's cuisine with my daughters, introducing them to the Chinese food that they knew we were not expert in cooking. And I think one of my daughters was so involved with the Acton Chinese Language School that she went on in high school to study Mandarin 5 days a week after it was offered in high school. And her teacher was the teacher who had first taught her in the Chinese as a second language track at ACLS. And then after she studied Mandarin in high school, she went on to minor in Mandarin in college. And she told me just last week that she would not be able to write Chinese characters as well as she can without all the Sunday afternoons she spent sitting in a desk at ACLS practicing calligraphy. So I would say that the Chinese school was really our entree into learning about Chinese culture. As a network of adoptive families, we always tried to have Chinese New Year celebrations and Autumn Moon Festival celebrations, but we were really Caucasians trying to imitate what we thought were the ways these holidays were celebrated. So it was really important for us to really learn from you all.
Okay, thank you, Virginia.
Yeah.
And actually, I have one last question for Kongxuan. And I know you have been deeply involved with town government. How would you advise to the young working parents to find the work volunteer balance to support the school and the community?
One can always start small. You know, when I look back, I started out with a desire trying to be involved with my kids' education when they were in elementary school. So I joined the PTO, ice cream social, auctions, all those things. You get to know a lot about, how the school is run and many other parents in your own school community. So someone, I forgot who talked about earlier, the sort of stereotyping of many volunteers in school are stay-home moms. But there are also many other people who have, a very busy professional life. Just this past spring when I was holding signs with my favorite school board of selectmen candidate and talked to another person who is supporting a different candidate. We had a very wonderful conversation, and she talked about she has been co-chair of AB. What is it called? Project Graduation co-chair for many years, and she's very, very accomplished business executive. So it does not have to be a stay-home mom, and we as immigrant parents, we could bring many different perspective values to the town, to the schools, So, just ask your friends, ask others who you have seen who has been volunteering and in various capacity. Just ask how you can be involved. And also most importantly is you will set a great example for your children so that they will be more involved in their community, in student bodies like Alex have done, and in other places, so that they can be a much more productive and contributing member of the society as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so, Doc, now we can move to the third section of our discussion around school.
Yeah, I think, we've got about 10 more minutes before we'd like to open up, the chat questions from the audience. And I'd like to ask general questions about people's experience with prejudice, with well-meaning but maybe misguided or misconceived assumptions about what it is to be Chinese and how people have approached you, and just kind of understand a little better how you've reacted to and how you've accommodated and maybe even helped some of the the subtle prejudices and biases that you've run into. People have said Acton is a very welcoming community, but I'm sure, especially in the last few years with the Trump administration and the pandemic, it's been a difficult time for Asian Americans generally. So I'm interested just in your thoughts and experiences about that topic. And I'll put you, Shan, on the spot on that one.
Hey, Doc. And there is a question from the audience. I would like to combine the question from the audience and to the panelists. I think we can combine Q&A with the panel discussion to address the topic from the audience, I think. So I guess there's next section. I think before we go to that particular talk about the prejudice, and I think many people like to hear about students' experience at school. Maybe you can start with that, then move to that topic you were talking about related with the Stop Asian Hate, I think, if you think it's okay. And the question from audience particularly directed to Alex, and as he's our youth representative here, and although in the interview there were others two AB graduates talking about their experience. So Alex, the question is about, can you share your school experience in AB, whether negative or positive? So.
Sure. Yeah, I want to be mindful of time. That's a very big one. Could talk about more, but I'll just say, when I was applying for colleges and found out that, for the college I ended up going to, there was a scholarship available for minority students, I told my mom I didn't qualify for that because for some reason I had picked up along the way that being Asian or Chinese did not constitute minority in America. So I think there's good and bad with that. I think the good is that I never, while definitely feeling different in the AB system, not the norm, not what I saw on TV, not the standard beauty body image, though there was in some ways maybe, I don't know how it is now, but my perception was there is a every school you want to be popular, you want to be there is a sense that the most popular athletes, kind of people with the most social capital or whatever in the school tend to be white. But then you can kind of carve your own niche among the Asians, people who tend to excel in academics and math and science club and academic decathlon by doing things like I worked for the newspaper, or I did volleyball, or I did cross country or speech and debate, although there were Asian people in that as well. I guess I say that to say, I definitely always would see people like me around the school. So I didn't think I was a minority and didn't realize, oh, Asian Americans only constitute 7% of the whole country. But I think that in doing that, it kind of it does erase the experience of Black and Latinx and Native people, even in our town, and it does even negate the uniqueness of other Asian communities, because when I really just thought of Asian, I just thought of Chinese and maybe Indian, to be honest. So I think there's a lot to like learn and to be educated on around that I wasn't aware of prior to leaving Acton. And I think, yeah, there's a competitiveness, and everything's a double-edged thing. There's a competitiveness to excel, to be in all honors, that I felt personally, or at least be mostly honors. And I think part of why that exists is because we're such a close community. Like, I know the children of many of the people in this call, and they know me. And so there's a goodness in that, but then there's a natural competitiveness that can go a little too far, I think, that would make me feel like I have really high expectations for myself all the time. And it was very stressful to, maybe not as much in high school, but that laid the bedrock for me later in life in college, still feeling pressure and to always be the best. And I guess the last thing, I realize I'm taking a lot of time. The last thing I'll say on that I've reflected on is I think Acton-Boxborough has a really strong reputation for the math and sciences. And usually the students we kind of send to the competitions tend to look like me. But I was not at that level of math and science. And so very quickly, I realized the way I can be different and excel in this environment is my writing. And so I really honed in. I majored in English in college. And I don't think maybe that would have gone any other way, but I wonder if it wasn't that I wasn't able to do math and science. It was just, I thought like, I can't do that math and science. Therefore, when I go to college, I'm not even gonna try a single biology, single chemistry class, because I just could not reach that. And I do think there's some discussion that could be had about that.
Thank you, Alex. And also, I know you, Xuan, you have 2 school-age children, either younger ones. So do you have any suggestion for school? What area of school can do better to support our children?
Yeah, I think our school have been doing really good in terms of being inclusive and being diverse. And our school administrators have been always very clear sending out this message. But definitely there are some small points school can improve. Like I heard this story from a Chinese parent. She shared with me that her kids used to refuse pack Chinese style lunch to school. Her kid is in elementary school because her kids worried that other kids may say some harsh comments like, oh, what's that? Oh, it smells. So the kids refused to pack Chinese style lunch. But then later, the family transferred the kids to Conant School, elementary school. The kids started to ask for Chinese style lunch because she see that the Asian style lunch is on school cafeteria menu, on the lunch menu. You can see that by making that kind of small change, adding Asian style items on the lunch menu can make a kid feel much more inclusive, and they can feel much more comfortable to share their Chinese heritage and share their food. So that's something I hope our school can do more. And in terms of right now, because of COVID, because of all the recent anti-Asian crimes, that I feel our students' mental health needs special attention. And because our students have such diverse body, sometimes our school may benefit from clinicians or experts who have this kind of special background in dealing with cross-cultural students' mental health. Like, for example, I recommend our school to join a consortium, which is formed by MGH, looking into the cross-cultural students' mental health. And it's led by national leading experts who are very active in this field. So not only they can work hand by hand with students who are from cross-cultural families and international students, they can help school staff to understand better because we all have really good intention, but there are still so many things we don't know. So if we can be more open to experts in the field, if we can learn more, I'm sure we can make it better.
Thank you. Thank you, Yuxian. And does any of you like to add on anything on the generation gaps and experiencing Chinese families? An example of it?
I'd like to add a little more here. I think for the second generation, the identity, I feel like, I don't know for others, some of the second generation at their age, some point, they kind of like how to identify themselves, their heritage. They may have some struggles on that. And I know that for my son, when he was in elementary school, he came back home and crying and sit in front of a mirror and look at himself, say, why do I look so different? And some kids kidding or joking at him for his looks and for his eyes. I think they may not with bad attention, but it has some impact on him. And I know that for AB School, they have done quite a lot of work to build a self-identity, self-esteem. I think we could do more on that, not only for teaching our kids, but also I think how to maybe have some workshops for parents, especially for the first generation of the immigrant parents and the new parents. And for me at that time, I don't know how to talk to him about this. I try my best. I think if we have some professionals to talk about how we talk to our children as an immigrant here, and for self-identity, recognize the difference in looking, culture, and proud to be who they are. I think that would be very helpful. And the second point, I think also further education, the elementary school, junior high and high school curriculum. As one of the young girl mentioned, that there's very little in our history book talking about Asian American, the history. And so I think if we build into the history and kids know about Asian American part of American history, they could be more proud of themselves.
Thank you, Jane, for sharing that. And I think that's all excellent discussions. And we could move to the next section, Doc. You just mentioned a few minutes ago regarding how we can all live productively in this multicultural, multiracial society. And you probably all remember in March after Atlanta shootings, and in Acton, Kelly's Corner, we have 2 weekend days and maybe over 100 people each time, and the 2 largest rally in Acton, and many people here, including in the audience, attend the protest. And we like to hear some of your thoughts and reflections and in that event. And I probably, maybe Kongxian, have you to kickstart? I know you attend both days as well.
Yeah, sure. Yes, that was a very moving experience for me. I think several lessons I learned from that experience. One is that even though we consider ourselves as a model minority or we've been labeled, and there's always people who feel differently. And what the negative is obviously all the sad tragedies in Atlanta and in other parts of the country around that period of time. But locally, I feel very appreciative of the support of many of our friends. We have many town officials from Acton who came to join the demonstration. And when we first trying to organize that, we also received the support from Acton Police Department as well as town staff, in particular town manager, on various logistic issues to us. So all those things are important. But what I think is most important thing is that we expecting other people to understand us, but we also have that as an Asian American, Chinese American in particular, have the responsibility of share our stories with them. Why we think certain things in certain way. For example, even though today is about Chinese residents' history, but a lot of discussion is centered around education, around school. And that's part of our identity in the sense that we value education. And how is that transcend our life, our in history back in China, long history, and also here in a sense that many Chinese Americans reside in Acton. The reason we're able to immigrate to US is because our technical background, because of our higher education background. So naturally, we hope that become a lasting tradition for our children and the children's generation as well. But we, on the hand, cannot forget that we don't live in a vacuum. We are not living in a little China here. We live in a town of Acton with many other competing interests and many other competing cultures. And I think it's important. Really, I feel that to have that understanding. In the thank you note, I sent it to the Beacon to thank people who are supporting us for during the 2 weekend. I talk about hate is a virus, and now that the understanding is the antidote to that. So I think that's really the lesson I learned through that experience.
Thank you, Kongshan. And in the rally, actually, we noticed that there's a sign and reading, this is their land, this land is also our land. So this particular sign actually is from Yoshin's daughter. So we'd like to share from you a little bit about the story behind the sign and afterwards.
All right, I would like to share this story. So since the pandemic started, our family has been extremely cautious. Like we pulled our kids out of school even before school, asking all the students to leave. So that shows how cautious we were. We ordered almost all of our groceries online, and we only go out to nature trails. But as a family, we attended 2 rallies in Acton, and we attended the rally in Boston Common. That's because we feel like for our kids, we need to do that. Right after Atlantic shooting, I think our school did a really good job, while us as adults were still shocked after the event. We didn't know whether or not we should talk about it with our kids. My son's teacher, the 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Scott, she organized an event for kids to discuss about it in their classroom. So it gives me confidence that that's something we should discuss with our kids. And after we sat kids down and we talked it with them, it was heartbreaking to hear our kids' response. My daughter's response was, but why? This is your land and this is my land. Why? And my son's response was, I don't want to go out to play. I need to make sure all the doors are shut, all the windows are shut. He didn't feel safe. So we told kids, we can speak up, we can voice out, we can let other people know that we are not happy about it. That's not the right way to do it. And sadly, another personal news I need to break is that at the beginning of this year, we made the decision to move back to China, partly also because of this. We sense that there is some kind of anti-Asian hate is rising. We don't want kids to live in this kind of environment. So that's why we were very active in all those events. We took kids to those events. And I sent out emails to people in New View and people in Indian Village to share our stories. And I would say that I got outpouring of support and love from people in town. For example, almost all the people in New View, they showed up at the rally at Kelly's Corner. And our neighbors in Indian Village, they even sent care package to our house. They sent handwritten notes to our kids to assure them that you are loved, you are appreciated, you belong here. So that's the first time I realized that being a Chinese resident, living in town, sometimes we can be vulnerable. We can share with our neighbors, and we are honored, or I really feel blessed that we can be vulnerable at a time like this because people will support us. Yeah, that's something I want to share with the audience.
Thank you for that moving stories here. And I also personally saw a letter from a parent of an AB students, and it's pretty long. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I did share that with our school superintendents. And so there's one line to say, in the history of this country, countless Americans have been conditioned to believe that Asians are perpetual foreigners. So how can we help our children, our students, to make sure they feel they belong here? This is their country, you know. So Alex, I'd like to ask you to share some of your thoughts in the area. How can our society do better to help our future generations?
Yeah, well, I think back to how in RJ Gray, I stepped foot in RJ Gray before I was ever a middle schooler because that's where the Chinese school was. And the rooms that I would later have predominantly white people teaching me in were filled with these Chinese parents, like teaching, these volunteers, and I think about how initially there was a sense in which there's like two different worlds in Acton for me. There's like the Chinese stuff, the Chinese dance, like the Chinese school, Chinese church, and then there's like school, which is like pretty different. But now what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is more involvement and engagement. I think that Uncle Xuan was sharing about that. I used to maybe have this idea that Chinese immigrants were like different type of Acton resident, but we are all like Acton residents and need to like have equal representation in the town and engaging in conversations in leadership. And so I'm really, yeah, I just want to, because I don't know how much time we have, I just want to just name like to honor the parents or the Chinese residents, the ones that moved from China to live here, to speak and learn a new language and to lead out in that new language and to do volunteer work. That's not even what they're paid for to do. I think that engagement, not just with it started with like Chinese cultural things, now to move into more civic engagement. And I think that is important to raise awareness and support for our Chinese community. But I think true justice and equality will come when we advocate for the rights of all people and a lot of the minorities and people who are not as represented, but still do live in Acton and the surrounding areas. That's my hope. And I'm grateful that things like this are happening. To be honest, I didn't know the Acton Historical Society even existed until I was asked to be part of this. So I'm glad there's more collaboration.
Thank you, Alex. And we're right about at the time. I think maybe we can take the last minutes to have each panelist see a few closing remarks to the audience, and we can close it up after that. Maybe you can start with Virginia here. You are muted.
So I guess
you are muted.
Adopting a child from a different culture opens a window on another part of the world that becomes of lifelong importance. You may not realize it at the time because you're too preoccupied with baby care. But one of the best parts of living in Acton for my family during the past 20 years has been knowing and learning from the Chinese residents here. And I just want to say thank you for that. And it's been a great experience to be part of this panel today. So thank you, Don and Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next one is Kongshan.
Yeah, I would echo what other panelists have said, and this is a great opportunity, and I'm very grateful to be part of this great town. Like many parents, not just Chinese parents, we came here because it's a good school system, but really it is more than just school system. And I often remind many people I talk to that we live in town of Acton. We don't live on the campus of AB schools. Be as much as we would like to be recognized, and I think part of it, the effort we as Chinese immigrant here is to be engaged in local civic affairs and to not only share our stories, but also to hear and understand other people's heritage and the stories and the histories, and be part of the act. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be part of it.
Thank you. So Youxuan.
Thank you. In the last, I want to say that I feel that I'm very fortunate here, although my family is in China, but I have really big extended family here in Acton. And they live in Newville, they live in Indian Village, they live in other places. And I got to know the first new Chinese friend in Acton even before I moved here. When I was just trying to find a daycare for my kid, that's when I know a Chinese friend who is in the similar case. And then quickly we formed a group of parents with similar age kids. And that's also part of my extended family. So thank you.
Thank you. And Alex?
Yeah, I think I said a lot of what I wanted to say just now, but I'll just say thank you for the opportunity. I really hope this is not just like, yeah, I'm grateful this project exists, because I don't want it to seem like, oh, this is the definitive Acton Chinese experience. There's so many diverse stories, so much left unsaid. I hope there's going to be more, and I'm grateful to hear there's more opportunities for stories to be shared and told, and also for the South Asian Indian community and other communities in Acton as well. I think it's really, really, really great. And yeah, I'm grateful. I like being an Acton resident, even though I don't live there anymore. I'm always proud to be from where I am, despite the complexity, despite some of the negative experiences. There's a lot of joy in coming back and knowing my family is well taken care of and is part of a great community there.
Thank you, Alex. Then Jianying.
I live in Acton for 21 years, and I would like to use this opportunity to thank for all my great friends, families, and neighbors for being there for us, helping us in the past. And I also would like to thank Acton Historical Society. I believe by learning about the history of each member of our community, how we arrived to this land, and how we help to build the nation and the city together, we will be more united, and we will be more empathetic, and be more respectful for each other. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jianying. So Doug?
Well, I just want to thank everyone, because I think you live these issues every day. You are familiar with them. It's been a great learning exercise for me, which is why I love being part of the Historical Society, the opportunity to reach out to different communities. So thank you for everything you've contributed here.
All right. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today and all the interesting perspective and personal stories that you shared with the audience. And I also like to continue this work and with Doc. And thank you all for your support. Thanks everybody from audience for making this successful event. So have a very good afternoon and enjoy your rest of the weekend. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.